Hey everyone, and welcome to GitHub in my day job. And this week we have with us an amazing guest, Rizel. Rizel, welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me, April. It's super
You're
exciting.
welcome. I'm really excited to have you. For everyone that's watching, I got to do some work with you about a year ago,
Yeah.
and oh gosh, was it a year ago? No, it wasn't a year. It was like 8 months ago, but it feels like too long. Um, so really excited to have you here. What are you going to talk to everyone about today? Oh, and tell everyone what you do, and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So really quickly, my name is Rizel Scarlett, or some might know me as Black Girl Bites. Um, what I do at GitHub, I'm a developer advocate. I mostly focus on like Copilot and Codespaces and just introducing beginners to open source. And it's really fun and exciting for me. So I'm excited to chat with y'all. Today, I'm going to kind of just show y'all, like as it is GitHub in your day job, kind of show y'all a beginner's experience from using Codespaces and trying out a new framework to deploying to GitHub Pages with a GitHub Action, and also how to leverage Copilot as well. So just kind of showing y'all, like, if you are maybe new to a framework or new to programming, how you can get up and running to your first web application.
And quick and easily, because I think the biggest barrier that most people have is like getting started on any project takes forever, and if it takes you hours, days, that's a barrier to entry, right? And you should kind of stop and like, maybe I'll pick this up later.
Right.
Yeah, it can be really frustrating. So this is going to be awesome. So for everyone out there watching, please feel free to go ahead and ask questions. I will do my best to keep an eye on them. I'll ask Rizel all the questions you have, and I think we're going to kick it off, and I think you're going to show some cool stuff.
Yeah, feel free to pause me or anything at any time. Happy
We'll
to.
do.
All right. So here right now, and I hope this is large enough for everyone to see, but basically we're on the GitHub Codespaces page. And this is where you can see like a list of all the Codespaces you have opened, which you can see I have a lot. And then we also have this cool thing called templates. And the reason why I think these are so cool, or quick start templates, is because if you are not, at least for me, right? If you're not really familiar with a specific framework, you can open up a template and you'll have like a browser already running and some code, and you can go ahead and experiment with it. So that's what we're going to do for right now. I'm going to open up the Next.js template, and we'll see that it's like up and running with a port already ready, a browser view, like a preview of what's going on with the code. And then we're going to go ahead and edit that code with GitHub Copilot, and try to build out something really simple like a to-do list.
And I think for everyone watching, like when you're starting with any kind of new framework or language, or even if you're working on a language you're really used to, those templates are perfect for getting started. Because a lot of times, even if I'm working a language, like what are all the things I need to get started? So we have this conversation like it works on my machine, or I'm on a Mac, or I'm on a Windows PC. We're on different machines. Or I was talking to someone in the community the other day, like my machine cannot run a lot of code because it's underpowered and it's broken, but they could run a web browser. So they could spin up a code space, access their code, and keep cracking on with what they need to do. So I think there's so many good use cases for it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I also have used Codespaces a lot to like teach people about coding. Like if I'm doing a workshop or I'm running a coding boot camp, I've had people open up Codespaces because, like you said, people have different types of computers. Some people have like what are those things called, the Chromebooks, and that's always been an issue of like, okay, where do you find these specific applications for people to download? And instead, I'm like, you know what? Just open up Chrome, and then you can literally have Visual Studio Code in your editor. So right now, like things are setting up here. So I'm just waiting for it to finish installing, and it should be able to show um, a view of the code right here. But okay, here it is. And so right now we can see that it already renders this page for us called Fast Refresh Demo with a button that works. And it's able to like throw an error for us as well. So if people are like, hey, I'm not really like, I want to learn Next.js, but I'm not sure how to get up and running quickly, you can see like the structure of the code, right? You're like, oh, okay, they use pages, they use components to like hold a button and all that. And then you get that browser preview. Another cool thing is like it already has a forwarded port running for you. And one thing that I enjoy about these forwarded ports is like you can make it, like you can change the visibility of the forwarded port. So it wouldn't just be visible to me if I change it to public. And the reason why I find that helpful is I know when I had just started off as a junior software engineer, I wanted people, like I wanted my coworkers to see like what I was working on, but it was difficult because we were remote. So now I can literally just be able to just say, hey, I'm going to change the port visibility to public or just private to my organization, share it out, and then they'll be able to say, oh, okay, here's what's going on locally on your computer. But right now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete all this code, and we're going to build a simple to-do list with Copilot. So let's start with that. So we'll see that, okay, right now it's empty, like, and it's going to throw us an error, of course. But let me just pull up one of my notes really quickly of like how I wanted to get started with this. Particularly,
yeah, and for those that are watching, if you haven't used Copilot before, it is your pair programmer, your AI pair programmer, and it will do some amazing stuff. I was in a demo yesterday, and we literally wrote an entire deployment with infrastructure as code with it. So, right, we've taken away our index page. We've literally got no code on our website. So let's see what Copilot does for us. Let's see what magic it has.
Yeah, yes. Thank you for explaining what it is, because I've talked about it so much. It's like the curse of knowledge for me that now I'm like, oh, everybody knows about it. But no, basically, here's a couple of tips as well with Copilot, because I think I often show people like, here's how I'm using Copilot. It was able to build this, but I don't always show like the tips and tricks. So one of my first tip to y'all is making sure that you use this thing called like prompt engineering, this concept of prompt engineering. And that's by different AI models have different ways to do prompt engineering. And that's simply just giving that AI model a statement and having it reach your desired output. So with Copilot, we often use comments for that. And one of my tips for making sure that you get that desired output with prompt engineering is making sure you give your application a high level context of what you're going to do overall. So that's what we're going to do first. I'm going to just write a comment that says we're going to create a to-do list. And in Next.js, just letting it know that. And then we also want to say the functionality that we want to do. So I want to be able to add items to the to-do list. And then I also want to be able to delete items for now. Like we could do edit too, but I just want to make sure that we don't go on too long. So this gives it a high level context of what it will be doing so it can continue to guide it in the right direction. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and like import some. Oh, there it is. It already is like assuming what imports it wants me to do. That's Copilot right there. So I just want to import React and the use state thing as well. I also want to be able to import this. So I'm just going to keep pressing tab. Not necessarily this styles thing. It's kind of trying to assume what I want, but I don't want that. So I can easily just say, nah, I don't want that one, but I do want to import link. And let's see if it does that for me. And then I want to quickly install the UUID package. So hopefully I remember how to do that. npm package, exit, all of these things. And I'm going to do npm install UUID 4, v4. And I know sometimes people say UID. I don't know. I say UUID. Okay, cool. So we're going to import that next. And I was hoping that it would notice that after I installed it, but that's okay. It's generative. Oh, there it is. It got it. It's generative, so it's not always going to be perfect in what it generates for us. So now it's already like saying we want to create that home function component, but I'm going to just do this. I'm going to export it in the beginning, and I'll close this off for it. And I'm going to give it my next tip, in addition to giving that high level context, is at each new function or each new task that you want to do, I like to write another comment just to continue to guide it in the right direction, just providing it with more detail. I know it's controversial to have a lot of comments in your code. So if you feel that like, oh, adding comments to your code is like not clean code, you can go ahead and delete it after. It's not like it'll be there forever, but this is just to help Copilot guide you in the right direction. So the next thing I want to do is I want to create a state for the to-do list with like default items. So maybe like things like I'm just gonna like come up with random items and give it a couple of examples so it'll be able to generate it for me. So I'm gonna write a comment that says create state for to-do list with default item like, and let me close this up because y'all probably can't see it, and maybe I'll word wrap as well. We can make this smaller since we're not seeing anything on it yet. I think this is better. So the default items, maybe I'll say learn Next.js, learn React, I don't know, and learn Copilot, right? So what we want to see is it create that state for us. And like, this is me not really being a strong Next.js developer. I am familiar with React, so this is not like completely strange to me because this uses like the same like JSX syntax, but it's still good to help me guide me in the right direction. The next thing I want to do is I want to create state for the to-do items. And it's done it. And I think I can go a little bit faster. Next thing I want to do is create two functions. One to handle adding the new to-do items to the list, and then the other to handle deleting to-do items. So it's already like, I love Copilot because it's already inferring that I want to do that. So I'm going to do that on the next line, add to-do item. And we may come across bugs. We might come across bugs, especially if you're not double checking what Copilot's generating. So I encourage people to like continue to double check all the time. So I'm just going to change this a little bit to make sure it's more specific. Function that handles adding new items to list. Let's see. There we go. This is what I wanted. And I just made it go away. There we go. And then the last one, function that handles deleting new items from list or deleting items. And this looks pretty right to me. So now I'm going to move into actually rendering the elements. As we can see, we're still seeing an error on our browser. That's because we're just creating functions. We haven't rendered anything yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell Copilot to help me render a couple of things. We want to render the input field, and we want to render the button to add items, and we want to render the actual list of items. So it's already created that return statement for me. It created a div. We're just going to keep tabbing and see what it generates for us. I think one of the most fun parts is just seeing like, what is Copilot going to generate for me? I'm going to close this for it just to make sure we don't have any errors. And now it wants to create a main tag for me. We're almost done with this part. And an input field. Boop, boop. So let's see the reason it's not working is because we haven't closed the main tag. So I'm going to close the main tag, and we can just see that so far it has generated like that heading or title of to-do list, and then the input, and all we want right now is the list and the button. So it's going to give us the button now, and let's show that list element. And close the UL. There we have it. We do have a list element, and we have these delete and add items. Let's just make sure it works and it's not throwing any errors. So let's say on my to-do list is to do a stream with April, and I'll and then we've seen that the add worked, we've seen that the delete worked. So this is just to show y'all, like, I don't think I took that long to be able to build this UI with Copilot. This is just to show y'all how powerful it could be for maybe someone who's a beginner in general, or a beginner with a framework, or maybe you are advanced and you're like, you know how to do all this stuff, but you just want to spin up something really, really quickly, or you're doing demos as a developer advocate like me, and you just want something to guide you in the right direction, reduce any like bugs and stuff like that you might have along the way, and then also with Codespaces, you already have the infrastructure set up. So I didn't have to like install Next.js. I didn't have to keep checking and like make sure my browser was running locally, and all this other stuff. I think it just like worked right straight out of the box, which I really enjoy. So I don't know if I should pause before I deploy this to GitHub Pages.
Yeah, I think so just to recap, because we have, I think, a couple people joining late. So we've taken a GitHub Codespace, deployed it based off of Node.js, right? So it put all the prereqs in we needed. We've used, sorry.
No worries.
I was maybe working in Node yesterday. Yes, and then we use Copilot. And actually, I like putting comments in my code because I don't remember what I ate for breakfast yesterday. And also working in a team, like if I do something, like my colleagues want to know why I did it. But for Copilot, if you give it that comment, it then generates the code. And what's really interesting is how it generates that code. So for experienced devs out there, this is great to go, how would it generate its code? Is it more efficient than my code? Because I've done this before where I'm like, I think my code might be more efficient versus Copilot. But it's so good at that. But we've built this website, and yeah, let's deploy it. Let's see what happens.
Awesome. And then also I wanted to recap the prompt engineering tips too, of giving it that high level of context, me even just giving it these examples as well, so it knew what to fill it in with, and then giving it these little details one by one. And then I think we also saw that, like, my other tip is to iterate on your comments. So like you also saw sometimes I wrote a comment and it didn't really give me the desired input, so I just deleted it and edited it again. But okay, we're going to push this up, and then we're going to deploy it to GitHub Pages with GitHub Actions. So I'm going to push this to my repository by I believe there is a way to actually do this in Codespace template or Codespaces instead. So I just want to double check that. If I go to all and we see that, I believe, interesting. I thought that the Codespace would show up and I can do publish Codespace. Oh, here it is. I believe this is it. Turbo rotary phone. I think so.
They give the most unique names to the Codespaces.
Right. Let me see. Actually, I think I could do it from here. Publish. All right, I'm just gonna commit it in general. Sorry, I wanted to show that little segment, but I didn't have that prepared as well. So I'm gonna say created to-do list, and I'm gonna press commit. I'll stage all of these from here. As you can use the terminal too, but I've started to get into using this little source control thing. I'm gonna go.
I've been teaching people Git recently, and I've stopped teaching them Git commands. Like I've been teaching them how to deal with conflicts in certain commands, but I'm using everything through the new add-ins and extensions now because they're so easy. You can hotkey them. So
right. I know. I'm like, I used to get so stuck on you gotta use the commands, but I'm like, it's not a big deal. You don't have to. I'm gonna actually rename this to-do list demo, so you can see from here that we'll do that to-do list demo, and we'll publish it as a repository publish branch. And it should be doing it. So cool. It says successfully published that. So we can go ahead and open in GitHub. And we'll see, this is my repo, all the code that I wrote. We can double check and go to pages and the index.js, and we're like, cool, that's the to-do list items. Next thing's next. And I think people might not know this as much, but you can actually use GitHub Actions to deploy to GitHub Pages. And if people aren't familiar with GitHub Pages, it's actually one of GitHub's first features, right? And it allows you to host a front end like website. And I used it a lot when I was first learning to code, just to like make my first couple websites. I remember like it was called My First Website or something, something really simple. But on the other side, if you have an open source project or some other tooling that you want, you can use that to host documentation or like host other cool, simple things. So what we're gonna do, right? I went to the settings tab in my repository. I clicked pages, and okay, the normal way or the default way that people have been doing it is saying build and deploy from a branch, but we're not gonna do that this time. We're gonna use GitHub Actions to do that. So I'll click that on my drop down, and it already recognizes that I built this with Next.js. So what's going to happen is if I click configure, it's going to show me a action workflow that I can use to deploy my Next.js website to GitHub Pages, because all of these are slightly different. For example, in the build section, I believe every different like framework will need like different build commands. So I believe this has like it's looking in the out folder after you do next build and next export. So each of these are customized to popular frameworks. So once I
So for those of you that haven't used Actions workflows, it's more than a CI/CD tooling that we use at GitHub. It literally can automate anything. And I think what's really awesome is you've taken your code, you've built your code with Copilot, and you said you want to deploy it, and it picks up what language you're using and builds that workflow file. Because when you're learning a new language, or if you're not very familiar with YAML, because YAML is super frustrating, the fact it just spits out the YAML file with the workflow that you need and it will deploy it for you is wicked handy. Because I've struggled with YAML because I've missed a space or put a thing in the wrong place, like a lot, because formatting's crucial. So when we talk about like barriers to entry, this is an awesome, easy way to get started deploying your GitHub page out there.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, the tabs are just they're
Crazy. When we have the tabs versus spaces argument. Or, I mean, nice discussion. So we've had a question in the audience. We've actually had two questions. The first one is, what is GitHub Action? So Waris asked that. I did say it was CI/CD, so continuous integration, continuous delivery. It is a pipeline tool, yes, but it does so much more than that. So it's amazing for deployments. You can deploy it to, so like a GitHub page, which is hosted in GitHub from your code directly. You can deploy to Azure, AWS, GCP, or on-prem data centers. So you can kind of deploy anywhere, but it does more than that. It also literally automates anything. So anything from your code in your repository. So I'll give you all an example. I work with a lot of folks that have they don't have a lot of things automated, and they have tasks that they do in their day-to-day job, whether they're using Bash or PowerShell. And a lot of these people do put these in scripts. Some of them don't. So we've taken a lot of these scripts, automated them, and either used a timer. We can do that with a GitHub Action, make it on a timer, and then it executes that script. So automates a task for you that you're doing every day. And it just saves you 15, 20, 30 minutes of time, pulls a report, whatever. You can automate stuff in your repository. You can do all sorts of stuff with it from there, or into the cloud, and just automate processes so much easier. So it is more than CI/CD. We do offer cloud hosted runners, which Rizel is using here. I find them really fast. They're kept up to date. They're a lot more secure because they are managed by GitHub, in the sense that we are updating them. So you can also have them on-prem, but it's up to you to manage that. So there's a difference there. And when they're hosted in the cloud, they support runners for Mac OS, Windows, and Linux hosts. So if you are developing for Mac, Apple devices, you could absolutely test your code against that and get those runners to support that. So this one's running on an Ubuntu latest container. Absolutely fine. That's usually my default unless there's a Windows specific thing. But this, checks out her code. It's going to go ahead and build it. And it's going to deploy it. It does everything she needs it to do without having to do it. Exactly. And then if you want to change your code, then you can execute that action and redeploy your page out. We've also had a question about your demo repo. I will get that out in a banner for everyone in just a moment.
Yeah, I can grab that for y'all in a second. While we probably wait for the action to run. And like you said, that was a great description, that like GitHub Actions automate anything in your repository, from CI/CD, like deployment, testing, to like anything else. And after I deploy this to GitHub Pages, if we have time, I'll show some of my favorite GitHub Actions that I think are awesome. Yeah. So what we're gonna do is commit the changes. I love this because like I don't even need to know the nitty-gritty of this action. I'm just gonna go ahead and deploy it. Like if I'm new to coding, like I don't need to do anything else. What it did though is recognize that it created a folder called GitHub.github, and then another folder inside of it called workflows, and it saved the action in here, or the workflow in here. GitHub Actions, or GitHub will only recognize actions that are located in these folders. Just a little FYI for folks. So if we go to the Actions tab, we'll see that our action is running right now. It's going through the build process. You can see the different steps that it's taking, right? First, it needed to set up the job. Then it did a little bit of a checkout. It detected what package manager I was using. It's setting up Node. It's setting up Pages. It's installed the dependencies that I needed by running npm CI. I hope this is big enough for y'all. And then it built with Next.js. So the build step is done, and now it's doing the deploy step. And once the deploy step is over, it'll generate and a URL for me, and I can just go to that URL and see the actual page.
Yep. And for everyone out there watching, this is the repository that that Rizel is working from. It's available for you all to look at. It is actually forked from a GitHub repository. If you can see it underneath, it's generated from a GitHub Codespaces Next.js demo. So either one will work. For those of you getting started, I mean, you can absolutely get started with this, but you can go net new, right? You don't actually need this repository to get started. I think that's the best part of this. You can start net new, get Copilot going, run a GitHub Codespace, and just rock it. You don't actually need the repository, but this repository is absolutely available for you. So there's the link for you, and I'll also put it in the comments for everyone that's watching.
Yeah, and the way that it's forked is from what I showed earlier with those templates. So you don't like she said, you don't need my repository. You can go to github.com/codespaces/templates, and you'll see these different templates for Ruby on Rails, for Express, for Next.js, and that's how it generated that that area where it says, oh, why won't let me click it? Where it says that it was forked from here, because that's like the template that I used for it. So it's done, and it tells me like, yeah, we created this URL for you. I think you can also see the view. I forget how it shows it. Come on. Okay, here. Yeah, if you click deploy, I think because I'm zoomed in too much, I'm not getting to see the view that I'm used to seeing, but that's okay. Basically, once you go to complete job, we can go to that URL, and we'll see that here we have that to-do list page that we made. That's super simple, and we could add things to it, add things, whatever. Right. So we see that it's working, and we can be able to share that to the public with whoever, and we'll be like, hey, friend, I made a new web page. Other thing I wanted to show, if we have time.
We always have time for you, Rizel. Always.
Awesome. Other thing I wanted to show was just some other GitHub actions. Now that we've seen this action, some other GitHub actions that I like.
And we should probably define actions for everyone out there. So when actually go back to your code for a second, Rizel, if you don't mind. I'm gonna have you drive, and I'll walk through it. In her repository, go back to your repo with the code. When she chose the template for the GitHub Actions workflow, it created that .github/workflows. Click on that, and that's her YAML file that it spat out. I was going somewhere with this, and then my brain just stopped.
Sorry.
It's fine. No, it's me.
I could help.
Blonde moment. Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, so it spat out a YAML file for her. I was going to go somewhere with this.
I could help.
I don't remember where I was going. I had a really great idea. My brain just stopped. So
when you were
action. Sorry, the actions workflow file. So it creates the workflow file, which is what you see here. In a workflow file, it's devised of an action, if that makes sense. So we're going to go show you some of our favorite actions, but to write these actions, they are built into GitHub, into the marketplace. So this is what this has done. This is pulled in, the workflow file pulls in all the available actions that it knows work, and it's pre-baked, right? So there's tons of templates of workflow files that you can get from GitHub. Or you can also write your own action as well. If there's something that isn't available, you can do that. But we're going to go ahead and show you actions. So these actions build up and make up this workflow file effectively. Sorry, that's where I was going. I'm just, out of coffee today. Someone please send coffee in the community.
We're doing a lot at GitHub. We're busy. No, that was perfect. Yeah, like you mentioned, right? There is a marketplace with a ton of actions. So you don't even necessarily need to make your own, because probably the one you're thinking of exists. I've seen people type talking about Kubernetes here. So let's see if they have like Kubernetes actions. They do. They have Kubernetes actions that do a ton of things for people and automate a ton of things in your repository. But the one I wanted to talk about there's two actions, one that I've contributed to and then one I created on my own. And the first one, the take action, is created by my a past manager of mine, a former manager of mine, and he created this action called the take action. And how it works is, and let me pull up, sorry, I should have had these pulled up. Open source. How it works is basically if you have an open issue in an open source project, right? So the way open source projects work, if people aren't familiar, is that there's open issues of like people saying, hey, I need you to help me maybe add a new image or do this or do that to a project. So here we can see an example is like bugs should not load more button if no more data, whatever. These are different things that people can say, hey, I want to help out, I want to contribute to this. And the way that it works is instead of Brian, who's my former manager, who maintains this project, instead of him saying, okay, I have to assign each person to an issue, which can end up being a lot of work, just because they're doing a lot as well. They're not just managing the project, they're coding, they're like doing a bunch of project management, they're making sure everybody's happy. So in addition to like not making people have to wait to get assigned an issue, they can just assign themselves it by typing .take on an issue. So I made a comment that says .take. And what happened behind the scenes is a GitHub action, as we can see, GitHub Action spot assigns the issue to myself, and that removes the fact that B Dougie would have to do it for me. It just removes a lot of work for him, even if it's something small. So we can go ahead and look at the code. So we can see here that I literally did get assigned without him doing anything. And then it also responds saying, thank you for taking this on. What we can see for the code is first, we should have a workflow here for it, or it might be in .github. It's in this repo. GitHub. He must have moved a couple things, but we can. I'll look at the repo here. It has the similar thing, right? So what we can see first is what was used to build the action. So, basically what he's done here is for this workflow, you can say like, hey, if you wanted to use this on your own, instead of you like recreating this, all you have to do is copy and paste this into your own repository and just change a couple of things, right? So maybe you don't want the message to say, thank you for taking this issue, let me know if you have questions. You might want it to say something else. You can go ahead and edit that yourself, and you'll be able to get like your little customized image of this. It's very interesting that I can't see the actual code for this, and I don't know. But since we can't, I'll show y'all my action because I think that's a little weird. So invite collaborator action. Here is an action that I wrote on my own. So you can see the code that I used to write it is just some JavaScript code where I'm just tapping into GitHub's API. And what my action does is basically every time someone requests to join the maintainers community, which is a private organization for maintainers, it'll go ahead and send them an invitation. So what I do in each of it, first I check to see if they're actually a collaborator or listed as a member of that repository. After that, I go ahead, if I see that they're not, I just add the collaborator, and I add a comment saying something similar like, hey, this person's been added. And then once they've been added, it closes the issue. And we can see this happen live. I'm going to show y'all right here. We're going to go ahead and actually add a maintainer. If we go here, basically when someone requests, they open up an issue saying, hey, I want to join this maintainers community. So we can see, okay, cool, there's a pending invite for this person. We can see that they maintain this project called Cube Edge. And what I do to trigger that action, and we'll look right here to see what it's looking for. Basically, it looks to see like, do they get this label that says collaborator added, or other labels are approved. So I'm going to go ahead and click approved. And what should happen once it's labeled approved is if we go to GitHub Actions, it should start running a pending invitation request. And we can see that it's trying to add the collaborator, and it'll go through each of the steps. I want to find the word approved here. Oh. But we're going to go ahead and keep seeing that it's actually adding that collaborator. So it went through setting up the job. It went through performing the invitation action. And what we'll see when we go back to this issue is, one, the issue's not open anymore because we had 8 earlier. We can see that it got closed, and it added a couple other labels on here called collaborator added. And it also added a comment saying that Kevin has been added to a member of this repository. And we can see here that I wrote, like, I instructed it to do so. So if the user did get added, it's going to say like, hey, adding a adding a label. Let's just go back to that. Collaborator added right here. Yeah, it's going to say collaborator added, and then it's going to look for that username and say this member has been added to a member of this repository. So on their side, that Kevin person would have received an invitation to like get to join the maintainer community.
And that's really, really useful. So I talked about actions literally being used to automate anything. Joining a repository, this is perfect. If you have an open source repo, or you just even have a private repo that's part of an organization within your company. So maybe you work for a corporate company, and to bring people into a project, you can kick off this actions workflow to do exactly that. Bring the people in, add them in, and then you can send them other things. You can send them the README. You could get them like some links to getting started with Codespaces, or, you know, what languages you guys work in or whatever. Like, there's so much you can do with this that automates something, because onboarding people is probably the hardest part of any project. It delays the projects. So I love, again, literally automating anything with actions workflows.
Right. Exactly. And I'm going to show one last thing, and then I'll be done. This will probably only take about 2 minutes. But for folks who didn't know, we've recently launched a VS Code extension called GitHub Actions, which allows you to view the logs within your editor, rather than having to go back out here and say like, okay, what happened to the action, blah, blah, blah. If you want to do it right within your browser, you can. So I already have this opened, and I just want to show y'all. Maybe, is this big enough? I'll zoom in just a bit. I like to zoom in because sometimes people watch streams on their phones and stuff like that. So here's like the Explorer section, but we also have this little icon here. This is the GitHub Actions section. And if we go to workflows, we'll see all the workflows that we recently ran. And you can go ahead and be like, oh, was it successful? All of mine have been successful. I don't really have any errors to show y'all. I wish I did. But if you click each of these jobs, it'll show you, or it should show you, the different logs that it took. Here we go, right? So for add collaborator, it opens up a new tab for me, and it kind of shows me those logs that we saw on that actions tab within the repository, of it doing this initial checks, of it looking to find like different secrets for us, and of it just like wrapping up the whole process. So if you were just like, wait, why did mine fail? I want to locally see it, I want to locally try it out, you can do that here. And that's really all I wanted to show. And I guess that's end to end of my role. I use Copilot a lot for demos. I use Codespaces to either teach people during workshops or coding boot camps, and maybe to try out new frameworks. And then also GitHub Actions helps me to automate different situations in open source communities. That way it takes away a little bit less work for me.
Absolutely. No, that was awesome. I love the GitHub Actions workflow in VS Code, because you can see the actions extension. You can go in and see all the actions you've ran, and you can audit it. So if you're working on a lot of projects, you got a lot of actions running. It also gives the full auditing insight. I work with a lot of like PMs, project managers, that want to know what's going on, what's happening. And it's great insight to that. So you can pull the logs up, and if something does fail, you can address it pretty quickly as well. It's all good stuff. All good stuff. Awesome, Rizel. Let's see if there's any more. I haven't seen any more questions from the audience. So if you folks have any more questions while we're going, this is it. It's the time to ask. I'll go ahead and throw down some links for everyone, because I know we've gone through a lot of stuff.
Sorry.
A lot of great stuff. So first off, when we started today, we started off with Codespaces, right? And Rizel used a template for her Codespace. So follow this link. pick a template for whatever language it is you're working on. And so she did that to start her project, got some code, and then we used Copilot to generate it. And then when she went back into her repository, it actually saw that what language she was working in, and it created that action for her. So that was really, really cool. And then also the working repository for the code today is this one here, the codespaces.next.js. Go ahead to there and have a look at what's happening. You can look at the source code. You don't really need the source code to kind of continue on with what we're doing today to really replicate it. But lots of good stuff. Right. And for those of you watching next week, we're going to be talking about Codespaces more in depth. I think it's Wasim and Christopher at Geek Trainer are going to be on the show. So we're going to go really in depth into Codespaces next week. So if you all have more questions, and always, feel free to reach out to myself or Rizel on Twitter or LinkedIn. Rizel is the queen of Copilot, I think, and just awesome stuff. So getting started end to end with Pages. Awesome demo, Rizel. Really appreciate it. Really, thank you for joining us. So everyone join us, tweet us, hashtag or # or hashtag GHDJ. I did not come up with that. So just rolls off the tongue. Awesome. Everyone, thank you for joining us today. And tune in next time for more GitHub goodness. Bye.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Rizel.